I thought I'd better lift the energy before I started talking. Because as you know, our topic for the day is prepare to die. Which is, can be a little bit of a buzzkill if you're, like, oh. But there is a method to the madness, trust me. How good it is to be together in this wonderful season of life. And what I love about the springtime is that we get to watch. I was walking yesterday and I was just noticing how beautiful it is I love that with like this little snow-covered patch and the crocus beginning to emerge. And it's like, I love this season. You're sensing and feeling life re-emerging. But the truth is life never went away. You see, it wasn't like life stopped. And so often in our lives, we want to segment things. But there's a continuity to life and to the soul. There's a continuity to our unfolding being. I wanted to start this morning with a writing from Dr. Howard Thurman. Many of you know that he's one of my favorite spiritual teachers. For those who are not familiar with Dr. Thurman, he was a brilliant teacher, grandson of a sharecropper, so he experienced a tremendous movement in thought in his lifetime. He was a teacher and mentor for Martin Luther King and many others, and in fact had one of the first interracial churches in America. And every week he would write these little passages that they put in the bulletin, and so there's a collection of those called For the Inward Journey. And the one I want to share with you today is called A Seed Upon the Wind. I've shared it before. I've changed his wording a little bit so that it's gender inclusive. But I want, back in the day we all said men, he, it, so now we're cool. So I'm hoping he'll forgive me for operating with his sacred words. But just allow yourself to hear what he's saying. A person without God is a seed upon the wind. What a picture. A tiny living thing awaiting its moment of fulfillment, caught up in the movement of tremendous energy, is at the mercy of forces that are not responsive to its own needs. There is a grand unconscious vitality unfolding with mounting energy, its impersonal purpose. In the grip of something like this, what is a tiny seed? No more than a particle of dust, a nameless nothing. Here is the abandonment of all purpose, stark helplessness without mooring or anchor. The fact that there is locked within the seed a private world of pattern and design makes no difference to the fierce velocities that sweep it on the reckless, relentless way. A person without God is a seed upon the wind. She is a victim of the currents of life that carry her where they will, with a bland unmindfulness of purposes and ends which belong to her as a living, thinking, feeling creature. It means that such a person has no sense of center. He takes his clue to all meaning and values from the passing moment, the transitory event, the immediate issue of the day. The Master speaks of this in his direct question, what would a man give in exchange for his soul? But there is a sense in which a person with God is a seed upon the wind. The person who has made the primary surrender, the commitment, the yielding to God at the core of one's being. This is one who has relaxed his or her will to exercise and hold firm the initiative over one's life. This does not come without exacting struggle. One by one, the outposts of one's spirit are captured, retaken, and lost again through hours, months, even years of warfare, until at last the very citadel of one's spirit is under siege and one is subjected to utter yielding. There follows often the long silence when nothing stirs. Then, out of the quiet of one's vanquished spirit, something stirs, and a new life emerges that belongs more to God than to self. The movement now rests with purposes that are beyond the little purposes, the ends that transcend the private ends, the purposes and ends of God. There is a sense in which a person with God is a seed upon the wind. This message has particular meaning for me as one who's devoted his life to the service of the divine. And for those in the room who are pursuing such a path, it will have special meaning. For those in the room who thought you escaped the dilemma, let us just laugh together in our ignorant bliss, shall we? Because when we begin the spiritual journey, many things will happen. Often we come into the teaching with an understanding that we can make life happen according to our desire. We're excited. It's like, hey, you can go to this center and they'll teach you how to create the life you want. We're like, sign me up, baby. I'm all over it. Get me, I want money, I want other worldly things that I should not probably refer to at this proper moment. But stuff, you know what I'm saying. Yes. I want, give it, bring it, and I'm going to change my thinking, I'm going to change my life. And that's good. We can teach you how to do that. But as we continue on the spiritual journey, one of the things that we begin to discover is that the deeper we go, the more the outer makes no sense. I know. And so we're like, well, I don't want that program. Right? I just want to manage my life. But it turns out that as we're deepening in our spiritual awareness, and we begin to embrace a concept of life that is very different from what many of us grew up with. This idea of surrendering, allowing our life to belong more to God than to self, is not from that concept that believes in God as the great puppeteer, right? But rather from an understanding that there is a divine wisdom, a divine intelligence, a creative source. It is the thing that all religious traditions speak to in very different ways. And when we begin to understand the universality of this presence, we move into a different level of understanding and of a relationship with that. You see, many of us grew up with the concept of God as Father. And so, as when we were children, we went to Mom or Dad and said, Mom, Dad, here's what I want. And they gave it to us. Or they didn't give it to us. Right? And so many of us have that relationship. Some of us are still stuck in that relationship and don't understand why. Why can't I have what I want? Why can't I have it when I want it? Why can't it ever just be my way? Why does she get everything? We can go there so quickly. It's really quite remarkable, isn't it? But as we begin to deepen in our spiritual progress, in our spiritual awareness, in our spiritual practice, we begin more and more to let go of the divine as something of personality and more of principle. This impulsion, this one life that seeks its expression in, through, and as all of creation. We often say when we're speaking of the world, the world of form, that when we look around and we see things of substance, what we're seeing is the body of God. That there's a creative intelligence that is behind all of the forms. And so it seems to me ultimately, as we're progressing along, that at some point we must make the decision whether we will identify ourselves with the form in which we house or the essence that lives through the form. Whether we'll identify with the body, as it were, or with the spiritual self. and therein lies everything else that happens. For the one who sees the world of form as their security, you will certainly get slapped upside the head over and over and over again, right? If I could just have a relationship, boy, that would be sweet. Life would be wonderful, and I will live happily ever after, right? As it has been promised to you through the ages. And then we create the relationship. And they don't understand that they are supposed to make you happy ever after. They want to have their own opinions, their own ideas, their own way of being. And worse, they want to be respected for it. It's crazy. We think, surely if I could get this job, sweet, I will be set. Or if I could have this amount of money, then all things shall be taken care of. But the problem with form is it always changes. It always evolves. It always falls away and comes into new being. And so if we identify ourselves with the form of our lives, there will come a time when the form changes and we're going to get the opportunity to question our constructs of life, our beliefs of what we believe to be true, of what matters. And if it hasn't happened yet for you, get a ticket, take a number. It's on its way, right? So this idea of being a seed upon the wind, that when we begin to surrender our life to that divine intelligence, the good news is we don't have to give up the world of form, but we will be invited to give up our attachment to it. And that's a very different thing. Sometimes we find that when we make a commitment to live a more spiritual life, then things will work and things will start to happen and things will come together and things will fall apart. And that is just as it should be. You see, the very nature of life is that it always evolves. In this time in the springtime, in this season of reemergence, we can go out and we can look and we go, oh my goodness, that tree that I thought was dead turns out not dead at all. What was it doing for all those months? Just sitting there, right? But now new leaves are emerging and we go, wow, life came back. Well, the truth is, the reality is, life never went away. It just went dormant for a while. And in our own lives, there will be time when our lives look dormant. People come to me all the time, Reverend Marty, I've been praying all week. Sometimes even twice. And nothing's happened. Okay, well, you're a loser. What? No. I don't. I swear I do not say that. I say, apparently God doesn't want you to have that. No, I don't say that. Those are just the thoughts that happen in my mind. I'd say... Somebody stop me. What do I say? Oh, I say... I say, unto everything there is a season. Oh. Yes, I know. That's not a much more spiritual thing that you would want from your minister. Yes. I can get there. Eventually I will get there, But unto everything there is a season. And so in our lives, we're cultivating the consciousness so that then when the seed is planted, it emerges and it grows and it flourishes. But too often in our lives, we're looking at the winter time of our life and saying, well, where is it? It is dormant. It is preparing. And so we stay with it even until the new emerges. And then it happens like that. Have you noticed just in the last week, all of a sudden, things are happening. Life is re-emerging. It's springtime. So it is not by accident that this season of Easter happens with the spring equinox. It is not by accident that the celebration of the re-emergence of life has been ongoing forever. Easter is yet one more representation of death and resurrection, of life falling away and then coming into being in a new way. So today, obviously, and next week, we'll look at the metaphysical and allegorical aspects of this season. There are those who absolutely believe in the literal truth of death and resurrection, and I bless them. I was one of those people for many years. But my thinking has evolved, and so I blame no one. I don't make anyone wrong. I just have found that there's another way to approach life and reality that happens to serve me. So I get to talk to you today about prepare to die. It seems like I was saying the last time I said I was a kid and I had a sword in my hand, but now it should not come as a shock to us that we're all going to die physically. Anybody, am I breaking any news here? Right? Anybody didn't, nobody told me, right? Because we have some evidence over millennia of people who have died. In fact, we don't know of anyone who hasn't. So it would make sense to us to make peace with that the physical form in which we are housed now is going to stop existing. I would suggest to you, as all of the religious traditions through the ages have suggested, that we are not these physical bodies, but rather there is a spiritual reality to us that moves on. Now, in the East, they speak of the idea of reincarnation, of the soul re-inhabiting form in many different ways. In the Western tradition, it's a little different. I always say, who knows? Who knows? But what I do know, what I do find is interesting is that there's a common thread that comes through the various spiritual traditions that speak to the way we prepare ourselves for that transition. And one of the interesting things to me, if you look at various religious traditions, is they speak to the welcoming of this transition. That in fact, the resistance to it is what determines how easily it happens. So for me, it makes sense for us to prepare that there will come a time in our lives when we no longer get to keep this body. And the preparation for that often looks like getting ready for it, letting others know. We just had this last week a wonderful service that was performed by our wonderful community for a woman who's been a part of our community for many, many years, Cheery Love. And she was a bright and funny, Cheery Love. I mean, her name fit her perfectly. And so the ceremony, they had her all in butterflies and sparkly, and everybody got to write their message on her coffin. How cool is that? There was a sense of who she was. Now, that didn't happen by accident. There was some conversation. And I always say one of the greatest gifts we can give to our loved ones is to prepare for our exit and to let others know. Here's what I want. Here's my stuff. Here's my will. Here's my power of attorney. Here's my directive, all that stuff. So that when the time comes and we get to make our parting, then we can be about the emotional parting and not all the stuff that has to happen in the world. So at one level, we want to prepare physically. But at another level, we want to prepare spiritually. And that is what I want to talk about, is this metaphysical concept of that death and life happen simultaneously. Even as you are sitting in this room, there are cells in your body that have died. Let us pray. right? Did you know this? Right now, there's cells that have died in your body that will be eliminated from your body. Good news, there's new ones being born and emerging. And in fact, science tells us that every 7 years, our body is literally transformed. That you don't have the same cells you had 7 years ago. But you see, when we identify with the body, you say, what do you mean? I am my body. But when we identify with the Spirit, what we understand is that obviously there's an intelligence that holds all those cells together. Makes me look pretty much like I did 7 years ago. A little different, perhaps. Maybe a little taller, maybe a little wider. I don't know, But essentially, we can tell who we are. There's a divine intelligence. And so wisdom helps us to understand that if we can either identify as the spiritual essence of who we are and be at peace, or we can identify with the form that we are and be that seed upon the wind that is buffeted by the winds of change. And that when life changes and relationships changes and job changes and all the things change, and we're like, oh, what happened to me controlling my life? Right? So, the masters were helping us to understand that who we are is greater than any experience that we're having. That who we are at an inner spiritual essence is greater than the forms in which we take. And so, as I said, many of the traditions prepare us to be at peace with this transition. That to allow something to happen through us. We've talked about the Gnostic Gospels, and one of the Gnostic Gospels is the Apocrypha of James. And in it, Jesus is purported to say, do not run from death, but seek it out. For when you look at death closely, you will discover within it your salvation. For no one who fears death will be saved from it. He goes on to say, scorn death and take the thought of life. You see, in the Course in Miracles, there's a wonderful line that says, for too long you have focused on the crucifixion, and the real message is the resurrection. It is that life is triumphant. In the Upanishads from the Hindu tradition, it says, the world is the wheel of God. All living creatures revolve on its rim. The world is the river of God, with all streams coming back to Him. On the great wheel of being goes the individual self, around and around, believing itself to be separate from all else, until at last it sees itself as God and attains immortality. You see, we often talk about the ego and the spiritual self. The ego is a way of identifying that aspect of ourselves that believes ourselves to be separate. Anybody have it besides me? And when you're separate from life, what does that mean? It means you must control life. It means you must figure it out. It means you must prove yourself. It means all kinds of crazy things. And we spend time and energy trying to assure the ego. The spiritual traditions often speak to the death of the ego. Little hint for you. The ego doesn't want to die. The ego is not happy about this conversation at all. No. No, oh no, you won't, right? Say, I'm in charge. I control my destiny. But spiritually, when we begin to move into a deeper and different type of relationship, no longer seeing God as playing favorites, no longer seeing ourselves as puppets to the great puppeteer, but understanding that it is the divine impulsion to express itself more fully, more lovingly, more joyously through all of its creation. Then when we're talking about surrender, what we're surrendering to is the death of our little self so that the greater self can emerge and be born. And it is in that place and that awareness and that understanding that true possibility begins to emerge. No longer are we telling the law of mind what to do and how to do it and when to do it, but simply knowing that the universe is always seeking its highest expression through us and as us, so that we might experience our divinity here on earth. This is the consciousness that the masters speak of in different ways. Jesus called it the kingdom of heaven, the dimension of that we know our oneness with the all that is. And he says when we're in that place, then all things are made anew. When we're willing to surrender, in other words, when we're willing to die to our old way of being, then it creates the space for newness to emerge. One of the great traps we get caught in as human beings is we won't let go. I see sometimes young people whose lives have now changed, and they have little bambinos running around, but they want to hang on to their old party ways, Hey, no, your life changed. You must die to your old way of being and reemerge as this new person. I see how sometimes parents who've taken such great pride and have been such great parents and have loved having children in the home, and the children go away. And they look around and go, who are we now? You see, you have to die to that so that the new can emerge. Over and over and over through life, we are called upon to die to our old way of being. And where we resist and where we want to hold on is where we get stuck. So the Master says to us, if you would enter into this kingdom, you must be born again. Now, I can say that phrase here. When I was preaching in Oklahoma, there would be a gasp in the room. When you're in a heavy fundamentalist area, like, so any of you who are fundamentalists, just breathe. We're talking metaphorically here, remember? It's like saying, if I were to say here, tithe settlement, and watch you all kind of... I'm learning the hot buttons, it's kind of fun. They're just words. But you see, this is the thing. The death of the ego in the spiritual context is really surrendering those limited ideas, surrendering that belief in separation, surrendering, and this is always the last one to go, my sense of deservability or worth. To really understand that it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. Right? You see, here it all is. We're at the banquet. What was it Mame said? We're at the banquet of life, and half these suckers are starving to death. Right? We're at the banquet. It is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom. It is all available for us. And we want to hold on to our story. Well, not me. If you understood my background, right? If you would understand what happened to me, right? Some point, that's going to have to die. So that the new emergence of true self comes forth and says, yes, use me. Allow your perfect will to be revealed through my life. I will follow that higher calling and not the calling of ego. So this is a powerful, powerful time. This season of watching life supposedly reemerge. What we know is it never went away. It is now just coming into form. Over and over and over, we must be willing to release. We must be willing to question our assumptions. We must be willing to look within ourselves to see, where am I limiting my good? And when we're willing to do that, we can reimagine and re-engage in life and create the vessel and the place for greater good to make itself known. If, as I like to say, if it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, what is the problem here? And we'll find it in the mirror. So we begin by saying, it is my good pleasure to receive of all of this good. I am willing, I am open, I am receptive to my highest good, and I'm also so willing that I might even release some of my attachment to how it has to look. Ease into that one. So we must be willing to die. We must be willing to prepare ourselves for the transition from one state of being into the next. And whether that's through the physical body or whether that's through the metaphorical aspect of our life. I know some of you right now are carrying parts of your old dead self with you. You go, oh, this is a heavy burden I carry. Some might say, let it go then, but I don't know. I'm just saying. They might say that. If it is the Father's good pleasure to give us the kingdom, then let us make our good pleasure to receive it. Let us sense and feel the love and the joy and the abundance in each and every moment. Let us prepare ourselves to move into that dimension of spirit that recognizes the divine everywhere, in everything, in every situation, in every possibility. Let us be willing to readjust our thinking. I close today with one of my favorite prayers from St. Francis, where he teaches us profound wisdom. In it he says, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand. For it is in the giving that we receive, and it is in the pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in the dying that we are born to eternal life. May you be born to your eternal life in this moment. Let us pray. So we simply breathe into that awareness of the one life, everywhere present, every time equally available. We turn away from the realm of condition to enter into the secret place of the Most High, the spiritual dimension of which all the masters speak, this transcendent reality that houses itself in form but is not encapsulated by the form. And as I stand witness here to this truth and this reality, I'm simply recognizing that this one life, this infinite intelligence, expresses in, through, and as all of creation, is always at its source and at its substance absolute unconditional love, perfect peace, always in harmony with itself, always abundant and creative. And as I recognize this one life, knowing that all things exist within the one, I know that I too live and move and have my being in this divine presence. Therefore, the word that I speak has power and clarity and conviction, for in truth it is the word of the divine spoken through me. And how easy it is to know this truth for each of us gathered here, that we are each unique emanations of the one living Spirit, each individualized points of the one life, each magnificent expressions of the wholeness of the divine. And so I speak my word of truth for each of us gathered here. As I call forth that truth, I call forth that reality. I'm simply knowing right here, right now, that we are abundant beings. Why? Because we are created in the image and in the likeness of that which is abundance itself. And so we open our hearts and our minds to experience divine flow. We open ourselves to inhabit and to inherit the kingdom afresh. I'm calling forth the presence of wholeness, knowing that that expresses itself as perfect health, as well-being, as vitality. I'm calling forth the presence of divine love, knowing that it heals and transforms all that has been, so that we might be present in this moment to experience the self-givingness of the living Spirit. I'm calling forth the wholeness as healing. And in this moment, in this sacred, holy, perfect moment, we are willing to surrender. We are willing to let die that which no longer serves our highest expression, that which no longer serves our fulfillment of divine mission. In this moment, we bless it, we release it, and in its place, accept the magnificence of the one life living itself through us. This is the truth that I know. That the universe right now is saying yes. Be that place that I might know myself more fully. And so it is with a profound sense of joy and gratitude that I recognize this truth. It is with a profound sense of blessing that I give thanks. And as we stand in this state of gratitude, I simply invite us to be a blessing, to extend this blessing to this spiritual community, knowing that together we are divinely guided, guarded, and protected, that that which is seeking its revelation comes forth easily, joyfully, abundantly. We extend a blessing to our brothers and sisters around the globe. We're accepting, very simply, a world that works for everyone. We bless the planet itself with all of her inhabitants. And as always, we extend a blessing to all ministers and teachers of all faiths, for we recognize the many pathways to divine understanding and to spiritual unfoldment. We bless them all and name them good. And so in this moment of joy and gratitude, I'm simply giving thanks, for it is already so, as together we say, and so it is.